My wife said she needed space to find herself. She found my best friend instead. Posted to r/true off my chest. I'm a veterinarian. I've been one for 11 years now. I mention this because people often assume veterinarians are gentle souls, patient, nurturing, the kind of people who couldn't hurt a fly. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's exactly why I didn't see any of this coming. Maybe that's why, even now, 3 years later, I still can't quite protect myself from the people I let close. I'm writing this because my therapist suggested it might help. Process through expression, she says. I've been processing for 3 years. I'm not sure there's an end to it. But here goes. The beginning of the end. My wife and I were together for 12 years, married for 8. We met when I was in my final year of vet school, and she was finishing her master's in art history. She was everything I wasn't, spontaneous, artistic, emotionally expressive in ways that I, buried in textbooks and surgery rotations, had never learned to be. I thought we balanced each other. I thought that was the whole point. Looking back, I can see the distance that grew between us. The late nights at the clinic. The emergency calls that pulled me away from dinners. The way she started going to gallery openings alone because I was always too tired. I'm not making excuses for what happened. I'm just trying to understand it. My therapist says understanding isn't the same as excusing. I'm still learning the difference. She came to me one evening in late March, 3 years ago. I'd just gotten home from a difficult surgery, a golden retriever hit by a car, touch and go for hours. I saved him. I was exhausted but satisfied in that bone-deep way that only comes from doing good work. She was sitting at the kitchen table, and something in her posture made my stomach drop before she even spoke. I need to talk to you, she said. About us. Those 4 words. Every married person knows them. Knows the weight they carry. She told me she felt lost. That somewhere in the 8 years of our marriage, she'd stopped knowing who she was outside of being my wife. She said she needed space. Time. A trial separation to figure out who she is. I sat there, still in my scrubs, still smelling like antiseptic and dog hair, and I felt my world tilt sideways. But I loved her. God, I loved her so much. And love, I thought, meant supporting someone even when it hurt you. So I agreed. I told her I understood. I told her I'd give her whatever she needed. She moved out the next week. Rented a small apartment across town. We agreed to minimal contact. She needed the space to think, to grow, to discover herself without my presence influencing her decisions. I thought I was being a good husband. I thought patience and understanding would bring her back. Sometimes I wonder if I was a bad husband. If I drove her away. My therapist says that's normal. It doesn't stop me from wondering at 3 a.m. My best friend. I need to tell you about him. Because this story doesn't make sense without understanding who he was to me. We met freshman year of college. He was my roommate, a philosophy major with a terrible sense of humor and an even worse taste in music. We were opposites in almost every way, but somehow we clicked. 15 years of friendship. 15 years of inside jokes and shared memories and the kind of bond that I thought only existed between brothers. He was there when I got into vet school. He was there when I didn't think I'd make it through my internship. He was the best man at my wedding. He held my mother's hand at my father's funeral when I couldn't stop crying long enough to comfort her. When my wife asked for the separation, he was the first person I called. He came over that night with a six-pack and a willingness to listen. He sat on my couch, the couch my wife and I had picked out together, and he let me talk for hours. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. And when I finally ran out of words, he hugged me, and he said, "She'll come back, man. Just give her time. She'll figure out what she's got with you." Over the next 6 months, he was my lifeline. Weekly dinners. Late-night phone calls when I couldn't sleep. He'd check in on me constantly, always with the same message. Be patient, give her space, she'll realize what she's missing. I keep replaying every conversation. Every time he said, "She'll come back." Every time he hugged me while I cried. He knew. He knew the whole time. Update 1. The discovery. It was October. 6 months into the separation. I'd been doing better, or at least, I thought I had. I'd started exercising again. Cooking real meals instead of surviving on takeout. My therapist said I was making progress. I was starting to believe her. My best friend had left his jacket at my place after our last dinner. It was getting cold, and I knew he'd need it. I was driving by his apartment complex anyway. There was a pet supply store nearby, so I figured I'd drop it off. I didn't call ahead. Why would I? I'd shown up unannounced at his place 100 times over 15 years. I pulled into the visitor parking lot, and that's when I saw it. My wife's car. The silver Honda Civic with a small dent on the rear bumper from when she backed into a mailbox 2 years ago. The "I brake for animals" sticker that I'd bought her as a joke that she'd actually put on her car. My first thought, and I hate myself for this, was concern. Was something wrong? Was she there because something had happened to him? That's how much I trusted them both. Even seeing her car at his apartment, my first instinct was worry, not suspicion. I sat in my car for maybe 5 minutes. I watched his window. The lights were on. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. And slowly, like waking from a dream, pieces started falling into place. The way she'd known about the separation before I'd told anyone else. The way he always seemed to know how she was doing. The times he'd cancel plans at the last minute, always with an excuse that seemed reasonable in isolation but formed a pattern when viewed together. The way she'd started talking about needing space around the same time he started coming around more often. I didn't go up. I couldn't. I drove home in a fog, and I sat in my empty living room, and I waited for the sun to come up. Because I needed to be sure. I needed to hear it from them. I called him the next morning. Asked if I could come by to talk. He said sure, his voice completely normal, completely casual. The voice of my best friend who had been sleeping with my wife for 6 months while telling me to be patient. I sat on his couch, different from mine, but somehow the same in the ways that mattered, and I looked at him and I said, "How long?" He could have pretended not to understand. He could have bought himself time. But something in my face must have told him I already knew. I watched the color drain from his skin. I watched 15 years of friendship collapse in the silence between my question and his answer. 6 months, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. Since right after she moved out. Not before. That's what I held on to, later. Not before. It started after. As if that made it better. As if the timeline of betrayal changed anything about its existence. The marriage ending hurt. But him. That broke something I don't know how to fix. Update 2. The complexity of betrayal. Here's the part that makes this harder to tell. Here's the part that people won't want to hear. They weren't monsters. My wife didn't cackle with glee while destroying our marriage. My best friend didn't scheme to steal her away. That would almost be easier. A clear villain, a clean story, good versus evil. The truth is Messier. The truth always is. After I asked, how long, there was a silence that stretched forever. Then he started talking. Crying, actually. He told me everything. More than I wanted to know. He said he'd gone to check on her a week after she moved out. Just to make sure she was okay, he said. Because I was his best friend, and she was my wife, and he wanted to help. They talked. She cried. He held her. And something shifted. I didn't plan it, he said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice, the need for me to believe him. I swear to God, I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. Things don't just happen. I know that. Choices were made, again and again, every time they saw each other, every time they touched, every time he picked up the phone to comfort me while knowing exactly where my wife was sleeping. But I also know that people are weak. That good people do terrible things. That he probably did care about me, even as he was destroying me. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Not the betrayal itself, but the complexity of it. The way he could hold both things in his heart at the same time, genuine love for me and genuine desire for her. The way she could tell me she needed space to find herself while finding herself in his arms. My wife tried to explain too, later, during the divorce proceedings. She said she hadn't meant for any of it to happen. She said she did love me once. She said she felt trapped in our marriage, suffocated by my expectations, invisible in the shadow of my career. She said he made her feel seen. I wanted to hate them. Pure, clean hatred would have been so much easier. Instead, I got this tangled mess of grief and anger and, God help me, understanding. I understood how it happened, even as I couldn't forgive it. Update 3. The legal battle. My wife asked for the divorce. I didn't fight it. What was there to fight for? A marriage built on lies? A partner who'd found what she was looking for in someone else's bed? But she didn't just want out. She wanted compensation. Her lawyer painted a picture of emotional abandonment. Years of neglect. A husband so consumed by his career that his wife withered from loneliness. She wanted half the house I'd bought before we were married, the house I'd poured my savings into, the house with the big backyard where I'd planned to someday have dogs of my own. She wanted alimony. She wanted to be the victim. I won't pretend I wasn't angry. I won't pretend I took the high road purely out of moral superiority. When I hired my lawyer, I wanted to win. Not for the money or the house. I wanted to win because it was the only thing I could control. I couldn't make my wife love me again. I couldn't undo my best friend's betrayal. But I could make damn sure the narrative of our marriage wasn't written by the person who destroyed it. My lawyer was a woman named, well, I'll call her my lawyer. She was efficient, unsentimental, and very good at her job. When I showed her the evidence, texts, photos, a timeline that clearly showed the affair began after we separated, not before, she smiled in a way that was almost predatory. The emotional abandonment argument falls apart, she said, when we can demonstrate that she wasn't alone. That she had significant emotional support during the separation. From your best friend. Every night, apparently. The divorce proceedings lasted 3 months. My wife's lawyer tried to argue that the affair was a symptom of our broken marriage, not a cause. My lawyer methodically dismantled that argument. She brought in my work schedule. Busy, yes, but not excessive. She brought in text messages showing my consistent efforts to communicate during the separation, efforts that were largely ignored. She brought in evidence that my wife had initiated the separation knowing she had someone, to go. In the end, I kept the house. No alimony. A clean break, legally speaking. I won the divorce. I lost my best friend. I lost my ability to believe people mean what they say. Some victories cost everything. Update 4. The aftermath. The first year after the divorce was the hardest. I threw myself into work. Took extra shifts. Volunteered at the shelter on weekends. Anything to avoid the empty house, the quiet evenings, the space where my life used to be. My best friend tried to reach out a few times. Letters. Emails. A voicemail on my birthday that I deleted without listening to. I heard through mutual friends that he and my ex-wife tried to make it work, that they dated openly once the divorce was final. I also heard it fell apart within a year. Apparently, relationships built on betrayal don't have the strongest foundations. Who knew? I'd like to say I found that satisfying. I'd like to say there was some sense of justice when I heard they'd broken up. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired and empty and so fundamentally changed that I wasn't sure who I was anymore. People say, you'll find someone better. I'm not sure I want to find anyone at all. That's the part that scares me. I did try dating, eventually. My therapist encouraged it. Not to find a replacement, she said, but to practice trusting again. So I went on dates. Coffee with a fellow veterinarian. Dinner with someone from a dating app. Drinks with a friend of a friend who was perfect for me. And each time, I felt myself pulling back. Watching for signs. Analyzing every word for hidden meanings. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. The fellow veterinarian mentioned she'd had coffee with an ex recently, and I felt my stomach clench with irrational fear. The woman from the app took a long time to respond to a text once, and I spent the entire afternoon convinced she was with someone else. The friend of a friend mentioned she needed space to think after our third date, and I nearly laughed out loud at the trigger. My therapist asks if I've considered dating again. I laugh. Not meanly, just honestly. How do you trust someone after this? I stopped dating after that. Told myself it was temporary. Told myself I just needed more time to heal. That was 2 years ago. Update 5. 3 years later. I'm 38 now. My practice is thriving. I recently expanded, brought in a partner, a younger vet who reminds me of myself 15 years ago. Full of hope, ready to save every animal that comes through the door. I don't have the heart to tell her that hope fades. That cynicism isn't a choice. It's a scar that forms whether you want it to or not. My house is still too big for one person. I finally got those dogs I always wanted. 2 rescues, a 3-legged German Shepherd mix named Nothing, names feel too personal for this story, and a one-eyed beagle. They're the only beings I trust completely. Animals don't lie. Animals don't betray. They love simply, honestly, without the capacity for the kind of cruelty humans specialize in. I still see my therapist every other week. We don't talk about the divorce much anymore. We talk about patterns. About walls. About the way I've structured my life to minimize vulnerability. She worries, I think, though she's too professional to say it directly. She worries that I've built a comfortable prison for myself. A life that's safe precisely because it's small. Sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I'd never driven by his apartment that day. If I'd never seen her car. Would they have told me eventually? Would she have come back to me? Would I have spent the rest of my marriage not knowing? I don't know which would be worse. Knowing destroyed me. But not knowing would have been its own kind of destruction. What I've learned. I want to tie this up neatly. I want to tell you that I've healed, that I've moved on, that the betrayal made me stronger. That's what people want to hear. That's the story we're supposed to tell. The truth is Messier. I'm okay. Not happy exactly, but okay. I found a kind of peace in my solitude. I have meaningful work. I have my dogs. I have a small circle of friends, carefully chosen, kept at a careful distance. I've learned to enjoy my own company, to find satisfaction in quiet evenings and solo hikes and the simple pleasure of a life I control completely. But I'm also damaged in ways I don't think will ever fully heal. I still flinch when someone gets too close. I still analyze every interaction for signs of deception. I still wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, replaying old conversations, looking for clues I missed. I ran into my ex-wife once, about a year ago. At a coffee shop, of all places. She looked good, healthy, calm, maybe even happy. She'd moved to a new city but was back visiting family. We exchanged awkward pleasantries. She said she was sorry, again. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said she thought about me sometimes, wondered how I was. I told her I was fine. I didn't tell her about the trust issues, the isolation, the way her betrayal had reshaped my entire understanding of human relationships. What would be the point? She'd made her choices. We'd both lived with the consequences. Some things don't need to be said. As for my former best friend, I've never spoken to him again. I heard he moved away, started over somewhere new. I hope he found whatever he was looking for. I hope he learned from what he did. But I can't be the one to witness his growth. Some wounds are too deep for reconciliation. The marriage ending hurt. But him. That broke something I don't know how to fix. Final thoughts. If you've read this far, I'm not sure what I want you to take away. I didn't write this for sympathy or validation. I wrote it because my therapist said it might help, and because maybe someone out there is going through something similar and needs to know they're not alone. To that person, I'd say this: you'll survive. It won't feel like it for a long time, but you'll survive. You might even thrive, in certain ways, in certain areas of your life. But you'll also carry this with you. The betrayal won't define you, but it will change you. It will shape the way you love, the way you trust, the way you let people in. Maybe that's damage. Maybe it's wisdom. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. I used to believe that love meant vulnerability. That opening yourself completely to another person was the highest form of connection. I don't believe that anymore. I believe in protection now. In walls and boundaries and careful emotional management. Maybe that makes me cynical. Maybe it makes me broken. But it also keeps me safe. And after what I've been through, safety feels like enough. I won the divorce. I kept the house, avoided alimony, walked away with my finances intact. But I lost my best friend. I lost my ability to believe people mean what they say. I lost the version of myself who could trust without reservation, who could love without fear. Some victories cost everything. My dogs are getting restless. It's time for their evening walk. They're waiting by the door, tails wagging, eyes bright with uncomplicated joy. That's what I love about them. Their happiness is simple. Their loyalty is unconditional. They'll never betray me. They'll never need space to find themselves. I used to think I wanted a full life, a wife, children, a house full of noise and chaos and love. Now I want quiet. I want predictability. I want to come home to creatures who are simply, honestly glad to see me. Maybe that's giving up. Maybe it's giving in. Or maybe it's just adaptation. Survival of the emotionally fittest. I don't know what my future holds. Maybe I'll meet someone someday who makes me want to try again. Maybe the walls will come down, slowly, with time and patience and the right person. My therapist seems to think it's possible. She's more optimistic than I am. For now, I'm okay with where I am. I'm okay with my dogs and my practice and my careful, controlled life. I'm okay with the quiet. I'm okay with being alone. Not happily. Just peacefully. And maybe that's enough. Maybe peace is what victory looks like when you've lost everything else. Maybe this is what survival feels like on the other side of betrayal. My therapist says healing isn't linear. That there will be good days and bad days. That one day I might wake up and realize I'm ready to trust again. I'm not there yet. I'm not sure I ever will be. But I'm still here. Still breathing. Still getting up every morning and doing work that matters. Still capable of love, even if it's only for 2 rescue dogs who ask nothing of me except food and walks and the occasional belly rub. Maybe that's enough. Maybe, for someone like me, that's everything. Edit. Thank you for the support. I didn't expect this to resonate with so many people. To those who've reached out with your own stories of betrayal, I see you. I hear you. We're all just trying to survive this, aren't we? One day at a time. One careful step at a time. To those asking if I've considered forgiving them, I have. My therapist and I have discussed it many times. Forgiveness isn't about them, she says. It's about me. About letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison me. I'm working on it. Slowly. Some days I think I'm almost there. Other days I wake up at 3 a.m., replaying every conversation, every lie, every moment of trust that was being systematically destroyed while I was too naive to see it. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive them. But I'm trying to forgive myself. For not seeing it. For trusting too completely. For being the kind of person who believes the best in people. Maybe that's where the healing starts. Not with them. With me. Here's what I learned from losing my wife and my best friend in the same betrayal. Some wounds heal into scars, and some wounds just become part of who you are. I keep replaying every conversation. Every time he said, "She'll come back, just give her time." Every time he hugged me while I cried about losing her. He knew. He knew the whole time where she was sleeping, whose arms she was finding herself in. And he held me anyway, told me to be patient anyway, pretended to be my lifeline while pulling me underwater. The marriage ending hurt. But him. That broke something I don't know how to fix. They weren't monsters. That's the part that makes this impossible to process cleanly. My wife didn't scheme to destroy me. My best friend didn't plan to steal her. They fell into it, that's what they said. As if gravity was responsible. As if choices weren't made, again and again, every time they touched, every time he picked up the phone to comfort me while knowing exactly where she'd been the night before. Good people do terrible things. He probably did care about me, even as he was destroying me. She probably did love me, once. That complexity doesn't make the betrayal hurt less. It makes it hurt more. Clean villains are easy to hate. Real people are impossible to untangle. I won the divorce. Kept the house. No alimony. Clean break, legally speaking. My lawyer dismantled every argument they made. On paper, I came out ahead. But I lost my best friend of 15 years. I lost my ability to believe people mean what they say. I lost the version of myself who could trust without reservation, who could love without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Some victories cost everything. My therapist asks if I've considered dating again. I laugh, not meanly, just honestly. How do you trust someone after this? Every time someone mentions an ex, my stomach clenches. Every delayed text feels like proof of betrayal. Every request for space triggers a panic I can't control. I stopped trying. Told myself it was temporary. That was 2 years ago. People say, "You'll find someone better." I'm not sure I want to find anyone at all. That's the part that scares me. I have my dogs now. 2 rescues who ask nothing of me except food and walks and the occasional belly rub. They love simply, honestly, without the capacity for the kind of cruelty humans specialize in. Animals don't lie. Animals don't betray. Maybe that's why I became a veterinarian in the first place. I just didn't know it yet. I've built a life that's safe precisely because it's small. My therapist calls it a comfortable prison. Maybe she's right. But after what I've been through, safety feels like enough. I ran into my ex-wife a year ago. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped I was doing well. I told her I was fine. I didn't tell her about the trust issues, the isolation, the 3 a.m. replays of every conversation looking for clues I missed. What would be the point? Some things don't need to be said. Forgiveness isn't about them, my therapist says. It's about letting go so the anger doesn't poison me. I'm working on it. Slowly. Some days I think I'm almost there. Other days I wake up in the dark and I'm right back in that parking lot, staring at her car, feeling my whole world tilt sideways. Maybe healing isn't linear. Maybe some of us just learn to walk with a limp. I'm not happy. But I'm peaceful. And maybe peace is what victory looks like when you've lost everything else. My dogs are waiting by the door. Tails wagging. Eyes bright with uncomplicated joy. That's enough. For someone like me, maybe that's everything. My wife's business trips were actually trips to her lover's beach house. Posted in r/trueoffmychest. I've been lurking on this sub for months, reading other people's stories, wondering if I'd ever have the courage to tell mine. My therapist thinks writing it out might help. She's probably right. She usually is. I'm a marine biologist. I've spent the last 12 years studying migration patterns, tracking tagged sharks across thousands of miles of ocean, analyzing data points that most people would find mind-numbingly tedious. I mention this because it's relevant. When you spend your career looking for patterns in chaos, you start seeing patterns everywhere. Even in places you wish you couldn't. My wife and I met 14 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. She was the maid of honor, wearing this seafoam green dress that made her look like she'd just stepped out of the ocean. I know that sounds corny, but I'm a marine biologist. Everything reminds me of the ocean. She laughed at my terrible jokes about octopi. She asked genuine questions about my work. By the end of the night, I knew I was going to marry her. And I did. 3 years later, in a small ceremony on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Her in white, me trying not to cry. Our families mixed together like they'd always known each other. It was, without exaggeration, the happiest day of my life. We had 11 good years. I need you to understand that. 11 years of inside jokes and lazy Sunday mornings and arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes. 11 years of her falling asleep on my shoulder during movies, of me pretending to be annoyed when she stole all the blankets. She supported me through my doctoral defense, through the grant rejections, through the months I spent at sea. I supported her through her career changes, her anxiety spirals, the loss of her father. We were happy. I believed that. I still believe it, some of it, sometimes. The inconsistencies started about 18 months ago. Small things. The kind of things you notice but immediately explain away because the alternative is unthinkable. She started traveling more for work. She's in pharmaceutical sales, so conferences and client meetings weren't unusual. But these trips felt different. She'd come back from a 3-day conference in Phoenix with a tan. Not a slight tan, a real one. The kind you get from actually being in the sun, not from walking between an airport and a convention center. The hotel had a nice pool, she'd say. I squeezed in some relaxation time. I'd nod. I'd believe her. I wanted to believe her. Then I noticed her phone was always face down. Always. Even at dinner. Even in bed. When had that started? I couldn't remember, which bothered me more than the behavior itself. Had it always been that way, and I just hadn't noticed? Or had something changed? She stopped telling stories about her trips. She used to come home full of anecdotes. The colleague who got too drunk at the hotel bar, the keynote speaker who put everyone to sleep, the ridiculous thing the CEO said during the closing remarks. Now she'd come home, unpack, and when I asked how it went, she'd just say, "Fine. Exhausting. I'm glad to be home." I kept hoping I was wrong. Every piece of evidence I found, I tried to explain away. The tan was from a pool. The phone was face down because she was trying to be more present. The lack of stories was just exhaustion. I built elaborate explanations for everything because the alternative meant my life was a lie. But here's the thing about patterns. Once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. Update 1. The investigation. I hate this word. Investigation. It makes me sound like some paranoid husband who goes through his wife's things, looking for reasons to distrust her. That's not who I am. That's not who I wanted to be. But one night, about 6 months ago, she was in the shower and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a preview of a text message. I wasn't snooping, I was just lying there, and the light caught my eye. The message was from someone saved as Jennifer Work, and it said, "Can't wait to see you this weekend. The beach house misses you." Beach house. Jennifer from work was inviting my wife to a beach house. My wife was supposed to be going to a conference in Denver that weekend. I didn't confront her. I didn't say anything. Instead, I did something that still makes me feel sick when I think about it. I started checking the GPS history on our family car. She didn't know this feature existed. When we bought the car 3 years ago, I'd set up the app because I was genuinely worried about theft. We'd had a string of car break-ins in our neighborhood. I'd never used it to track her. The idea had never even occurred to me. Now I pulled up the history for her last business trip. The car had supposedly gone to San Francisco for a pharmaceutical conference. According to the GPS, she'd driven 3 hours north to a small coastal town I'd never heard of. She'd stayed there for 3 days. Then she'd driven home. I checked the trip before that. Same pattern. The Phoenix conference, where she got her tan, 3 hours north. The Seattle meeting, 3 hours north. Every single trip for the past 4 months had the same destination. A small town on the coast, nowhere near any conference centers or corporate headquarters. I spent that night in my office, staring at migration data from tagged white sharks, trying to focus on work. I couldn't. All I could think about was my own migration pattern, all those years swimming in one direction, believing I knew where I was going, only to discover I'd been swimming in circles. The mileage on the car didn't match her stories either. A trip to San Francisco would be about 800 miles round trip. The actual mileage was closer to 400. She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. Maybe she thought I'd never check. Maybe she didn't think I cared enough to notice. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I'd been auditioning for a role in my own marriage. All those nights I'd stayed late at the lab, feeling guilty for not being home, while she was. Where? With whom? I needed to know. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Update 2. The discovery. I told my department I needed a personal day. I never take personal days. My colleagues probably assumed someone had died. In a way, someone had. I drove 3 hours north, following the same route the GPS showed for her car. It's a beautiful drive, winding coastal roads, cliffs dropping into churning water, the occasional pod of dolphins visible from a highway. I've done similar drives for research purposes, tagging seals, monitoring coastal erosion. This time I wasn't looking at the scenery. I was looking at mile markers. Counting down. The town was small. Cute. The kind of place that probably has a farmer's market every Saturday and a single coffee shop that everyone pretends is better than Starbucks. I'd never been there before, but the GPS led me straight to a residential street near the water. Beach houses lined one side of the road. Some were rentals, some were clearly year-round homes. I parked at the end of the block, near a public beach access point, and waited. Her car was there, parked in the driveway of a weathered blue cottage with white trim. Wind chimes on the porch. A surfboard leaning against the railing. A life I didn't recognize. I sat in my car for 2 hours. I watched the house. I watched the ocean. I thought about every decision that had led me to this moment. Marrying her, trusting her, being so focused on my own work that I'd missed whatever had broken between us. At 11:47 a.m., they came out. My wife and a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, tanned, looked about 10 years younger than me. They were laughing about something. He put his hand on the small of her back as they walked to his car. She looked happy, relaxed, the way she used to look with me. I took photos. I documented the date, the time, the license plate of his car. I felt like a nature researcher documenting animal behavior in the wild, clinical, detached, methodical. It was the only way I could get through it. If I thought of them as subjects, as data points, I wouldn't have to think about what they actually meant. They drove away, probably to lunch, probably to the beach, probably to do whatever couples do when they're in love and don't have to hide. I drove home. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I'd learned enough from this subreddit to know that confrontation without preparation is a mistake. Instead, I called a divorce lawyer the next morning. Update 3. The preparation. My lawyer was a calm woman in her 50s who'd clearly heard every version of this story 1,000 times. She didn't judge. She didn't offer false sympathy. She just laid out the facts. Documentation is everything, she said. You have GPS records. You have photographs. You have financial records showing her travel expenses don't match her actual destinations. This is good. This is very good. I felt sick hearing my marriage reduced to evidence in a potential court case. But I also felt something else. Control. For the first time in months, I had information she didn't know I had. I had options. The house, my lawyer said. It was yours before the marriage. Inherited from my grandmother. I've owned it for 20 years. She nodded. That's separate property in this state. She can fight for a share of the appreciation during the marriage, but the house itself is yours. And alimony. She makes good money. You make good money. In a no-fault state, infidelity doesn't automatically affect the financial outcome, but judges have discretion. With your documentation, you have leverage. She'll want this to be quick and quiet. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering more evidence. Bank statements. Credit card records. A pattern emerged: dinners in that coastal town, hotel stays when the beach house must have been unavailable, gifts I'd never seen. She was spending our money on their relationship. Not a lot, she was careful, but enough to matter. I also found out who he was. The license plate led me to a name. Some light social media searching revealed the rest. He was a client. Someone she'd met through work, someone whose company bought pharmaceuticals from her company. The conflict of interest alone could end her career if the wrong people found out. I didn't plan to use that information. Not directly. But I wanted to know. I needed to understand who had been worth destroying our life together. He was divorced. 2 kids he saw every other weekend. A beach house he'd gotten in his own divorce settlement. He looked happy in his photos. My wife looked happy in the photos with him that I found on his private Instagram, accessible because he'd accepted a follow request from a fake account I'd created. I'm not proud of that. I was thorough. Some nights, during this period, I'd lie awake and think about the good times. Our honeymoon in Costa Rica, swimming with sea turtles while she laughed at my enthusiasm. The night she surprised me at the lab with dinner because I'd been working too late. The way she'd always remembered my mother's birthday when I forgot. The look on her face when I told her about my first successful grant application. She wasn't a monster. That's what made it worse. Monsters are easy to leave. She was a person I'd loved, who had probably loved me too, who had somewhere along the way decided I wasn't enough. I don't know when that happened. I don't know if I'll ever know. Update 4. The confrontation. I chose a Sunday evening. She was home from her latest trip. I'd made dinner, her favorite pasta dish, the one I made for our anniversary every year. When she asked why I was being so thoughtful, I said I just wanted to spend quality time together. We ate. We talked about nothing important. She seemed relaxed. Maybe even guilty relaxed, the way she sometimes was after coming home, as if being extra nice to me could balance some invisible ledger. After dinner, I asked her to sit down. I said I needed to talk to her about something important. Is everything okay? She asked. Is it your mom? Is she sick? My mom is fine, I said. I want to talk about your business trips. I watched her face. A micro-expression of panic, quickly suppressed. What about them? I want to talk about why you've been driving to a beach house 3 hours north instead of going to conferences. Silence. The kind of silence that fills a room like water, drowning everything else. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. I pulled out the folder. GPS records. Photographs. Mileage comparisons. Credit card statements. I laid them on the table between us like evidence in a trial. I know about the beach house, I said. I know about him. I've known for weeks. I've already talked to a lawyer. She went through the stages quickly. Denial first. This is insane, you're being paranoid. Then anger. You've been tracking me? Spying on me? That's psychotic. Then tears. Then, finally, the pivot I'd been dreading. You were never emotionally available, she said, her voice cracking. You were always at the lab, always with your sharks, always somewhere else. I was lonely for years. Years. He actually paid attention to me. He made me feel like I mattered. I'd prepared for this. I'd rehearsed responses in my head. But hearing it still cut. Because there was truth buried in there, somewhere. I had worked too much. I had been distracted. I had assumed she'd always be there, waiting, patient, understanding. But I hadn't cheated. I hadn't lied for 18 months. I hadn't made her feel like a fool. I'm not going to argue about who's to blame, I said. I'm done arguing. I'm filing for divorce. You can make this easy or hard. It's your choice. She chose hard. Update 5. The aftermath. The divorce took 8 months. She fought for the house, claiming that her contributions to mortgage payments, there hadn't been any, I'd paid it off before we married, and renovations, minimal, entitled her to half its value. My lawyer dismantled her arguments with documentation. She fought for alimony, claiming that she'd sacrificed career opportunities to support my research. My lawyer pointed out that she made more money than me and had received 3 promotions during our marriage. She tried to paint me as a controlling, emotionally abusive husband who had driven her into the arms of someone who actually cared. My lawyer presented the evidence of her affair with a client, which her own lawyer quickly shut down when they realized how damaging it would be if it became public. Her company found out anyway. I don't know how, I never told them, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted. Someone else must have talked, or maybe the affair partner's ex-wife knew people in the industry. By the time our divorce was finalized, my wife had been encouraged to seek opportunities elsewhere. She kept her professional license, but her network was damaged. People talk. Reputations don't recover quickly. The judge awarded me the house. No alimony either direction. We split our retirement accounts down the middle. She got the car she'd been using for her trips. I got the dining room table where I'd confronted her. Fair enough. I won the divorce. I lost the life I thought I had. I'm still not sure which one matters more. 6 months later. I'm writing this from my grandmother's house. My house. The house I've lived in for 20 years, that I thought would one day have children running through it, that I thought would be filled with grandchildren and holiday dinners and the steady accumulation of a shared life. It's quiet now. I got a dog. A rescue mutt named Darwin who was found wandering near a research station. He sleeps at the foot of my bed and doesn't judge me when I stay up too late looking at photos I should have deleted. I'm in therapy. Twice a week. My therapist is patient with me when I spiral, when I ask the same questions over and over. Did I miss signs for years because I didn't want to see them? Could I have done something differently? Was there a moment where I could have saved us? She says these questions are normal. She says healing isn't linear. She says some nights the victory will feel hollow, and that's okay. Some nights I wonder if I drove her to it. My therapist says that's normal. It still feels true sometimes. I heard through mutual friends that she and her beach house lover didn't last. Apparently, once the excitement faded and the reality of her situation set in, no job, damaged reputation, messy divorce, he decided he didn't sign up for someone with baggage. The irony isn't lost on me. He left her the same way she left me, suddenly, without warning, for reasons that probably made sense only to him. I don't feel good about that. I thought I would. I thought hearing about her downfall would feel like victory, like justice, like the universe finally balancing its scales. Instead, I just felt tired. She was a person I loved once. She made terrible choices. She hurt me in ways I'm still understanding. But she's still a person. Knowing she's alone and struggling doesn't undo what she did. It doesn't make me feel better. It just makes everything feel more real. The beach house detail haunts me in unexpected ways. I keep imagining her there, happy, laughing, feeling alive in ways she apparently didn't feel with me. I wonder what they talked about. I wonder if she complained about me, painted me as the villain in her story. I wonder if she believed her own narrative, if she convinced herself that I was so absent, so cold, that an affair was almost justified. Or maybe she knew it was wrong and did it anyway. Maybe the cognitive dissonance was part of the thrill. I'll never know. That's the hardest part. I'll never have a satisfying explanation because there isn't one. People aren't puzzles that resolve neatly. They're messy and contradictory and capable of loving and betraying at the same time. What I've learned. Someone in the comments of a similar post asked what advice I'd give to someone in my situation. I've been thinking about that. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I spent months explaining away evidence because I didn't want it to be true. That was a kindness to her and a cruelty to myself. Second, get a lawyer before you confront anyone. I know that sounds cold. I know the impulse is to demand answers, to scream and cry and make them face what they've done. But confrontation without preparation just gives them time to hide evidence, to craft narratives, to turn your justified anger into proof that you're unstable. Document everything. Know your rights. Then talk. Third, therapy isn't optional. I thought I could handle this on my own. I'm a scientist. I'm rational. I should be able to process emotions like I process data, methodically, logically, completely. That's not how it works. My therapist has taught me more about myself in 6 months than I learned in 36 years of living with myself. If you can afford it, go. If you can't afford it, find sliding scale options, online resources, support groups. You need someone to talk to who isn't personally invested in the outcome. Fourth, the victory doesn't feel like you think it will. I won my divorce. I kept my house. I didn't pay alimony. Her life fell apart while mine stayed relatively stable. On paper, that's justice. In reality, it's just two people whose lives are worse than they were before. She's alone and unemployed and probably blaming me for everything. I'm alone and employed and wondering if I'll ever trust anyone again. Nobody wins. Some people just lose less. Final thoughts. I went to the aquarium last week. I haven't been since before the divorce. It used to be our place, the spot where we'd go on rainy Sundays, holding hands in front of the jellyfish exhibit while she listened to me ramble about bioluminescence. It was different going alone. Quieter. I stood in front of the shark tank for almost an hour, watching them circle. They never stop moving, sharks. They can't. If they stop, they die. There's a metaphor there, probably. My therapist would have something to say about it. A little kid came up next to me, maybe 6 years old, and asked if the sharks ever got lonely. I don't think so, I said. They're not built for loneliness. They're built to keep moving. The kid nodded, satisfied with this answer, and ran off to find his parents. I thought about my wife. Ex-wife. I thought about her in the beach house, laughing, believing she'd found something better. I thought about her alone now, realizing that what she'd found was temporary, conditional, less stable than what she'd thrown away. I thought about me in this aquarium, alone, still processing, still healing, still standing in front of shark tanks and wondering what comes next. Maybe we're all just circling. Maybe the best we can hope for is to keep moving. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to trust someone again. My therapist says I shouldn't worry about that yet. Focus on trusting yourself first, she says. The rest will follow. I'm trying. I'm not there yet. But I'm trying. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. I don't know if telling this story helped or not. But it's out there now. It's real in a way it wasn't before. Maybe that's enough. Darwin is whining at the door. It's time for his evening walk. The beach is a 10-minute drive from here. Different beach. Different coast. No bad memories. Maybe I'll sit on the sand and watch the sunset. Maybe I'll think about her. Maybe I'll finally stop. Keep moving. That's all any of us can do. Edit. A lot of people are asking if I regret not confronting her sooner, or if I wish I'd given her a chance to explain before going to a lawyer. The honest answer is, I don't know. Some days I think I did everything right. Some days I wonder if a conversation, early on, could have saved something. But then I remember, she had 18 months of conversations with me while lying to my face. She had every opportunity to come clean, to fix things, to choose us over him. She didn't. By the time I found out, the marriage was already over. I was just the last one to know. Edit 2. For those asking about Jennifer from work, that was him. Saved under a woman's name to avoid suspicion. I realized that pretty quickly once I started connecting the dots. Classic move, apparently. My lawyer said she sees it all the time. Edit 3. I'm okay. Really. Or I will be. The dog helps. The therapy helps. Time helps. This subreddit, weirdly, helps. Thanks for listening. Here's what I learned from tracking my wife's lies like I track shark migrations. Patterns don't lie, but knowing the truth doesn't make it hurt less. For months I built explanations for things that didn't need explaining. The tan was from a hotel pool. The phone was face down because she was being present. The missing stories were just exhaustion. I was so good at finding alternate hypotheses that I almost convinced myself the simplest explanation couldn't be true. But I'm a scientist. And eventually, the data becomes undeniable. The worst part wasn't discovering the affair. The worst part was realizing I'd been auditioning for a role in my own marriage. All those late nights at the lab, feeling guilty for not being home, she wasn't home either. All those times I thought we were building something together, she was building something else, somewhere else, with someone else. My ex-wife wasn't a monster. That's what makes this so hard to process. Monsters are easy to leave. She was a person who laughed at my terrible jokes about octopi. A person who surprised me with dinner at the lab. A person who held my hand in front of the jellyfish exhibit. She was all of those things and the person who lied to my face for 18 months. People aren't puzzles that resolve neatly. They're messy and contradictory and capable of loving and betraying at the same time. She told me I was never emotionally available. That I was always with my sharks, always somewhere else. And there's truth in that. Buried under the deflection, there's truth. I did work too much. I did assume she'd always be there. But I didn't cheat. I didn't make her feel like a fool in her own home. Those were her choices, not mine. I won the divorce. I kept the house. Her life fell apart while mine stayed relatively stable. On paper, that's justice. In reality, it's just two people whose lives are worse than they were before. Her beach house lover left her when things got complicated. Didn't sign up for someone with baggage, apparently. I thought hearing that would feel like victory. It just felt tired. She's still a person. Knowing she's struggling doesn't undo what she did. It doesn't fill the empty side of the bed. Some nights I wonder if I drove her to it. My therapist says that's normal. It still feels true sometimes. One thing I know for certain, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I spent months being kind to her and cruel to myself by ignoring what I already knew. Don't do that. The explanation you're afraid of is usually the right one. A kid at the aquarium asked me if sharks ever get lonely. I told him they're not built for loneliness, they're built to keep moving. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Keep moving. Not because it fixes anything, but because the alternative is worse. I'm not there yet. But I'm trying. Darwin is whining at the door. Time for our walk. Different beach. Different coast. No bad memories. Keep moving.